Read the Bible, you'll find out that God's not too happy with what's going on around us.
Redeem the time, because the days are evil.
The Bible has not changed.
Boldly proclaim the restoration and preservation of Christian values in America.
Satan has brainwashed a whole nation.
As goes the church, so goes the nation.
Nobody's convicted of anything anymore.
And now, here's Last Call with your host, B.J. Edwards.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. Here, I'm taking drugs this morning. Here we go.
Caffeine?
Yeah. Oh, well, that's what I'm going to tell you it is. In my many years, I have come to a conclusion that one, useless man is a shame. Two is a law firm. And three or more is Congress.
Boy.
John Adams said that. John Adams said that.
Oh, boy.
Hey, before we get into the week in review, last week in review, disclaimers, got to put them in here. You're about to listen to 2 hours of opinion and entertainment supplied by Last Call Radio. We're not doctors, lawyers, Indian chiefs, politicians, professional journalists, or either of us hold a doctorate degree in anything, not that that would make any difference. Our opinion, of course. We only ask that you personally and or corporally not take our statements or those that we voice from others personal, nor do we recommend that you act on them as if they were facts, although they might very well be just that, facts. But again, that's our opinion. You're not required to listen to, act on, or repeat anything that you hear today, nor assume that they are facts, and that any information we present is by no means meant to harm or threaten anyone. And for our Christian viewers, and for the record, this is indeed Christian Talk Radio with a sting. However, I'm not a pastor, a preacher, street, or otherwise, nor do I speak in tongues unless using the obvious laws of nature's God, and it is speaking in tongues. And please, Jesus was involved in politics being the atmosphere that all societies work and thrive. And at the moment in America, where the battle rages. Think about that quote. Plato warned that one of the penalties for refusing to participate in politics is that you end up being governed by your inferiors. That could be a secular humanist, God haters, communist, Marxist, dictatorship. That list goes on. With the darkest places in hell being reserved for those who maintain their neutrality in times of moral crisis, according to Dante. Here we go, Mr. Anderson. You have a good week?
Here we go. I had a pretty good week. It went fast. I don't know what happens to time. It just seems to go quickly.
It doesn't stop, does it?
It doesn't stop. It doesn't give us a break, does it?
Yep.
And it keeps showing up in the color of my hair. And
when you're young, you want to get older. When you're older, you're going, what was I thinking?
Right. I'm looking for that Peabody dog that's got the Wayback Machine.
Yeah.
See if we can go back and change some things and come forward. And I don't know.
We've really messed this world up, Mr. Anderson. We really have. I'm talking about man in our infinite wisdom. Yeah, just incredible. We're going to talk with our brother Scott Shara this morning of Deprogramming with Grace's dad. Interesting gentleman.
Very.
He's been through it, and he's learning. He's when certain events happen in your life, it opens your eyes and makes you stop and think.
It does at that, and then you got to think about what you're going to do with your life from there on.
Yep. Professional parenting, second hour. Stay tuned for that. I think you're going to enjoy it.
Professional parenting.
Here we go. Favorite part of the program for many of you. Good news.
Good news, bad news.
Bad news. And I'm not sure category. Let's go to the good news. I've been working on this. I've been trying to limit this. I just keep running into problems trying to limit this. So forgive me. Georgia judge dismisses 6 counts against Trump.
Huh.
Laura Trump became RNC co-chair. Elon Musk is mad at me. Don Lemon says Musk ended host partnership with X hours after the interview. I thought Elon Musk was a genius. He should have known what he was getting into when he wanted to dance with Don Lemon, right? Meanwhile, across the pond, police sprayed with manure as farmers blockade EU headquarters. Global warming. Is this why the UK decided to ban gender affirming care for kids? Europe banned gender affirming care for kids. Hello?
Huh.
Xavier Milei already taking a chainsaw to Argentina. I want to get him on this program so bad. Rampant inflation. We could do positive news. What happens when you get a non-politician into office accidentally? Things had to get bad enough. Keep electing Joe Biden's in the world, folks. And things will get bad enough where you will grow some common sense. Meanwhile, back in the USA, West Virginia lawmakers okay bill drawing back one of the country's strictest child vaccination laws. Charles Barkley, love him or hate him, right, calls out Joe Biden. What?
Huh.
Illegal alien foster homes exposed. We're going to talk a little bit about foster homes in hour number 2. These 14 Democrats voted for a resolution denouncing Biden's administration border policies. We're going to find out how bad it gets, folks. How bad it gets. You keep drinking that alcohol, you keep smoking those cigarettes, you don't think anything's happening, but it is. How about this? AOC gets a primary challenge. Oklahoma passes bill to stop trafficking abortion pills that hurt women and kills babies. Oklahoma's an interesting state.
It is.
Nonsense. One state bans gender neutral driver's licenses. Arkansas. That's good news. Again, I'm trying to limit it, okay? I know there's a lot of you that like to feed on bad news, and I apologize to you. Speaking of bad news.
Okay, what's bad?
Millions of illegal border crossings threaten U.S., yet the Dems think Americans aren't in danger. Keep smoking them cigarettes, keep drinking that alcohol. Jump off a cliff or two while you're at it. Haiti hell, violence subsides as power players are jockeying for unelected transitional positions. Take a real close look at Haiti, folks. It starts with H like hell does.
It's a very curious situation.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's, we know what's going to happen in the Dominican Republic right next door. And there's been a lot of Christians that went to Haiti. What happened? 62-year-old Boeing whistleblower John Barnett found dead in his truck after he didn't show up for a legal interview linked to a case against Boeing. I think we have a mafia here, folks. And if you threaten them.
I remember when stuff like this happened in Russia, communist Russia. Used to hear about this a lot. Didn't happen in this country.
No. Never going to happen here. Never going to happen in America, a Christian country, right?
We'll have to ask our friend Phil Haney.
Yes. Who committed suicide.
Yeah.
And I think he said on our show
he did.
He would never commit suicide.
Said if he comes up not well, wasn't him.
Yeah. And several months after that, he committed suicide.
Yeah.
Dollar Tree and Family Dollar to close 1,000 stores. You know, there's other retailers that are closing stores, folks.
Yeah, what's with Dollar Store? That surprised me.
Yep.
I thought they were building them all over.
Yep. Even cheap is more expensive these days with our former vice president in office. New TikTok ban bill. HR 7521 gives the executive branch of government the power to define any platform. Gives the government the power to define any platform. We're on a platform, aren't we?
We are. We are. And a friend of ours has been having trouble with Rumble, and fortunately, we're not having a lot of trouble yet. But
keep listening. Tell your friends about it. Tell your friends about it. Pentagon claims it's out of money. Can't replace weapons sent to Ukraine. Oh my God. Washington State gets $2,000 to snitch on your neighbor for speech crimes.
Huh? What?
Washington State. You can get yourself $2,000 if you snitch on your neighbors for hate crimes, speaking hate crimes.
They're up in the ante on that speech, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
We're getting there where.
God, yep. We know as Christians that the power of speech, because God spoke the world into existence.
Yeah.
And devil doesn't want us speaking Christianity into that world.
You know, truth. That's the word, right?
Yep. I don't know what to think about Mike Johnson. I really don't. He whips out Ukraine funding promise to appease Senate with no mention of border security. We were talking earlier on the pre-show about politicians, and if you had a Christian, strict Christian, yeah, King James version, yeah, a strict Christian that was running for office, what happens? If you're expecting Christians to do something to get that individual elected, what's going to happen? And even if you get them elected, we all go back to our caves and start singing Kumbaya to get in touch with our God feelings and leave them all alone. It's not just getting them elected, it's keeping them elected. You need to create an environment where they can get elected. And then you need to create an environment where they can stay elected. Very important. I guess God will take care of that. All we have to do is pray, right? I'll take care of it. Interesting. A question for a Christian speaker, Mike. When is it wrong time to do the right thing? All right. See there, I got you fed with the bad news. Now, a word or two from I'm not sure category. Robert Hur admits forgetful Biden read aloud classified files to a ghostwriter. But Hur, and if I'm using the correct pronoun here, just kidding, folks. Anyway, Hur, pushed back on Democrats who claimed his report cleared Biden of any wrongdoing, saying it did not exonerate the president. We identified evidence that the president willfully retained classified materials after the end of the vice presidency when he was a private citizen. Former special counsel Robert Hur revealed to Capitol Hill testimony that Biden willfully retained classified materials as a private citizen and gave them to Mark Zoldzinger, the ghostwriter of his $8 million book, who later tried to destroy the material. It brings up a very interesting question, and I talked to a lawyer this week about it, and of course I got a legalese answer.
Legalese?
Yeah.
Can you interpret it?
If the former vice president is now unable to stand trial for something he did decades ago, and we're going to assume he was of sound mind then, how do courts handle this? I mean, how do you handle this as a court? You're incapable of making good decisions now, but you made bad decisions then on purpose. So what do? Do you not take him to court? AKA what we're talking about right now? Huh? Hard to say. Let's see if I got anything else in here in the I'm not sure category.
Not sure.
Mm-hmm.
Not sure.
House passes bill to ban or force sale of TikTok. I really don't know what this means to us, folks. I'm not too awfully sure it's good.
What's not good?
About TikTok, banning TikTok?
Well, it seems to me they can start taking control of more and more. And
Yep.
They can do security, However, I mean, our information on Facebook, or I don't know, all the different platforms out there, Gab, and I don't. There's so many. Um, Hacking computers is relatively easy for high school students to do. So, how much of our information's leaking out?
Yeah, well, and I worry about the power. In a totally unrelated headline, Supreme Court rules public officials may block their constituents on social media. A local official in Michigan blocked commenters after being criticized over COVID-19 policies.
What is it that BJ says about information?
It's the power to make decisions. Money is the power to make decisions. Hey, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I'm going to bring Scott in. I love Scott. I love what Scott is learning, and I love his enthusiasm. Scott.
Last Call with BJ Edwards. Real talk about real life.
Good morning to you.
Good morning.
How you doing this morning?
I'm doing okay. I'm about 70% this morning.
Well, and I apologize for taking advantage of you. I know you had a little free time. I know you needed a break, but I'm very selfish, so I wanted to bring you on the show. I'm going to try to make it worth your while, brother.
Oh, that sounds great.
I listened to a interview with you and Coach the other day, and you brought up a subject, an item that I didn't even know about. And keep in mind, I'm the family guy, the natural family guy. And I keep saying that if you want to destroy a civilization, you got to get rid of the family first. The church is important, okay? I'm not denying that. But if the family's broken, how can you have a church? And our opposition knows that. And this isn't a recent phenomena. And Scott, I have to confess, I grew up in the 60s. And if it feels good, do it. Make love, not war. And if you look those phrases up in the encyclopedia, you'll see my picture there with a beer in one hand and a joint in the other. Okay. I mean, I was all in. I didn't realize, of course, I'm too young anyway, too intoxicated anyway, to realize what kind of trouble I was asking for. And one of the things that you brought up on your program, by the way, Scott, what is your website? The best way to reach you?
The website is ouramazinggrace.net. And if people want to reach me, there's a contact form on that website. So you can do it that way. We also have another website, graceshara.com. Okay. And the purpose of that website, it's a landing page for people to follow our case. We have the first jury trial coming up. Very unique opportunity coming up in November, where we have the potential to blaze a trail for other people. And that's exciting. So people can follow there. And we're specifically asking people to sign up there because we're trying to create a database of our own, because we've got some substantial things going on, BJ, that are beyond what I can talk about, but we'll be having some calls to action relative to those things. And it's exciting stuff, but we have to be able to reach out to people when we have those calls to action. So those are the ways you can get a hold of me or follow the story.
Okay, Scott, I appreciate that. This is my opinion, folks, okay? Scott's daughter, Grace, was killed by government finance witch doctors who had one thing in mind, and that was money. This is my opinion, okay? The money they were going to make by treating his daughter and, in essence, ending her life. Again, my opinion. All right. And I'm not asking you to agree or disagree with that, Scott, but I'm just letting our audience know that's my opinion. And losing a son or a daughter is just an incredibly you can't describe the experience. It leaves a vacuum that you're never going to fill. You're never going to fill that. I've lost a son, and I understand what that means. But Scott, you've lost a son and a daughter, which is just absolutely incredible. And the amount of, to me, Scott, it makes life really raw. You see things in a much harsher manner than you used to. But you see things that you normally wouldn't see in the first place. Is that a pretty fair statement?
Well, I would have never seen what I know now if Grace and Travis wouldn't have died. You know, Travis took his life by suicide in 2018. You know, and at that time, it was, as I see it now, it was necessary to walk through that to prepare to walk through Grace's murder.
Wow.
So unlike you, I don't have an opinion of those deaths. I know it's not an opinion anymore because I have 3,500 hours of research, and I know both of my kids were murdered by the system, and it was done on purpose, and it's not a joke. And that's why, even though I was taking the day off, I came in. I was walking outside when you called yesterday. I told my wife that you called, and I just didn't want to do an interview today because I'm shot. I am really burned out. But she said, you got to keep going because we're what is going on. I mean, if you don't know what I have inside my head, you cannot save yourself physically. But way more importantly is saving yourself spiritually, which only God can do. But I mean, we've got to wake up to the reality that this is a spiritual battle. And just about everybody in this, unfortunately, is sucked into the dialectics that get us off track of what's going on. I was listening to you just before you brought me on. And so, for example, the TikTok thing. So I don't know anything about TikTok because I'm 60 years old. I don't play those type of games and listen to that stuff. And I've got work to do. I can't be screwing around with that stuff. But regardless, anytime Congress does anything, we should instantly say it's wrong. And sometimes they throw us a bone to get us to think that they're doing something. So like you'd see that there's a warning on the cigarette packages that this will cause cancer. Okay, so then you think, well, or the seatbelt law. Those are examples of how they throw us a bone periodically that makes sense. But just apply it to Grace's situation. Grace was strapped down in a hospital. I was taken out of her room by an armed guard, so she didn't even have an advocate for 47 hours. Okay, well, those are violations of the Americans with Disabilities Act. So people think the Americans with Disabilities Act, oh wow, Congress, they're for the disabled. Well, these things are all deceptions to get us to believe our government is for us. So when we decided to file the lawsuit, our first thought process was we're going to file a federal case and have a disability claim. Well, as we researched the Americans with Disabilities Act, what a newsflash. It's only for the living. When somebody's dead, there's no liability under violations of the Americans with Disabilities Act. So you can see when Congress gets involved, it's virtually always a dog and pony show. Even these bones they throw us that are the truth are to get us to think that they're doing something for us. Now, I just want to say one more thing relative to that, because as I'm looking at the spiritual battle, right now, it's so strange. A federal judge in the Brooke Jackson False Claims Act case, which that's a case against Pfizer that she brought against Pfizer. She worked for Pfizer and realized they were doing no testing of this supposed vaccine. So this supposed, of course, it was never a vaccine. And another news flash, no vaccine has ever been tested, and vaccines are not God's way. God's way is he's got our bodies designed to heal. So, get off the vaccine train. In fact, anybody that is trying to just focus on this COVID vaccine is a mistake and that we should have never done that, they're lying to you, because really they're still part of the whole vaccine agenda. So anyway, the federal judge in the Brooke Jackson False Claims Act case against Pfizer said he dismissed the case because we would lose confidence in the health agenda of the government. So just wrap your head around that. And then I'll just say one last thing before, this is part of my open, I guess, BJ, but we have, Pfizer's a monster company. Personally, I watched a documentary called Shot Dead, which was about vaccine injuries and vaccine deaths. This last jab. So there's 17 million people worldwide that have been murdered by this jab. All right. So this documentary was out. I watched it a couple months ago with my wife. And as soon as I got done, I said, Cindy, Pfizer's going to be a sacrifice because they're releasing this vaccine data now out to the population. And so if the government takes Pfizer down, and you saw in the Epoch Times a couple weeks ago, it was announced that we can now sue Pfizer. Well, that's actually, that would go against the Vaccine Safety Act of 1986, which gave immunity. So, it's so crazy how they do this, but the government wants us to have confidence in the government, anything but God. And so if the government takes down Pfizer, the people would, oh my gosh, this is great. Our government's for us. Well, believe me, it's way bigger than what people are seeing. So was that enough of an open?
Yeah, that's plenty, Scott. I want to talk about the spiritual battle. I want to get into that conversation, but before I do that, I want to get back to 1967. On your program, on your interview with Coach,
yes,
you talked about a plan to depopulate the U.S. 1967. Where did that information come from?
Well, how I stumbled across it is real interesting because I went to kindergarten in 1968, and God gives us certain memories that nobody else has, but I had a very clear memory. And as I became a researcher, I started to dig into the memory I had. So the memory was from a weekly reader that we had in 68.
Mm-hmm.
And so this innocent weekly reader, right? Is the weekly reader honestly in on it? Yeah, they're in on it. And they were in on it in 68 because the weekly reader that I was chasing down said that it's irresponsible to have more than 2 children. And if your parents had an electric can opener, that's wrong because of the limited resources on the planet. So they're already setting in motion in 68 by programming 5-year-olds that we have a population problem and a climate problem, a resource problem. So when I started to dig into it, that's when I stumbled across this Rockefeller document that you're referencing. That was the first document that I saw. Okay, great. You got it up on the screen. So this document, there's some footnotes with it and things too. It's about a 6-page document, but this is the main document that shows on one page what the plan to depopulate the United States looks like. And there's some interesting things. So you see, why do I call my son's suicide murder? Because look at chronic depression. So these are goals. These are goals of our government to depopulate us. You can't make this stuff up. And so when I say, so how do they do that? So Travis is depressed. Of course, he goes sees a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist just provides him a med. Okay, so, and we're programmed as the population that allopathic medicine is the way to go. And allopathic medicine is all about treating symptoms with meds. Statistically, we have 4.2% of the world's population, but we consume 45% of the world's pharmaceuticals. We, in our country, we consume 4.8 billion prescriptions annually. It's like, oh my gosh, we have bought in hook, line, and sinker to allopathic medicine. And I was in that too. You think, okay, well, the Travis is depressed, get this med. Okay, he's fine. All right, well, that doesn't deal with the cause. It deals with the symptom. Well, then all of a sudden now you got something else happens. Okay, well, let's do this med. And in Travis's case, he had a pain from a tumor. So he gets a different med, and those meds were contraindicated. And it's a known contraindication that contraindication causes suicide thoughts. And 30 days to the day after he started the contraindicated med, he commits suicide. So this is all by design, because we have a population that's dependent on meds, a population that becomes dependent on the government, a population that has been dumbed down. You saw on that list that They want to corrupt the water supply. So of course they've done that with fluoride. And you go into any dentist. And I challenge anybody listening, just go into the dentist and see what happens when you start poking around with questions. I have refused, for example, the x-rays. Well, then they start telling me, well, you have to get x-rays. And one of the hygienists told me it's a law. I said, it's not a law. I left the chair because she's lying to me. So then they make me sign a statement, and which is fine. A statement that I'm not responsible.
Intimidate you.
Right. It's all.
We're going to take a break, Scott. When we come back, I want to continue this, but I want to get into some of the 1967 plan to depopulate the U.S. You're going to find a lot of this interesting. B.J. Edwards along with Mr. Anderson. This is your last call. Hang in there, folks.
Last call with B.J. Edwards. Real talk about real life.
Thanks to the Rockefellers and their marketing efforts, among others, we have a 1967 plan to depopulate the U.S. And keep in mind, this is the era of free love. This is the era where you have a pill now, and that was nirvana for me, Scott. When the pill came around, are you kidding me? I was in heaven. That's all I needed. Increased homosexuality, fertility to control. You mentioned the water supply. Tax married more than single. Chronic depression. You mentioned that. Discover private home ownership. Discourage private home and driving cars. Have those cities where you don't have to go anywhere. Everything's around you. Lose your independence. Payments to encourage abortion and sterilization on demand. It doesn't mention changing sex, but that's all part of this. That's just an extension of this. You have an entity or entities, and they all have a father, as Mr. Anderson and I were talking about earlier. A father. You're going to have one or two fathers. It can be Satan or it can be God, and they're following their father Satan, and they're doing everything that that you allow it to be done in the United States. And it's all negative, but it's all attacking the family, because Satan knows the family was the first institution that God created for the benefit of man. And it wasn't by accident. It is foundational of everything, whether it be the church, whether it be the government, and the content of the family. One biological man, one biological born woman, lifelong committed monogamous relationship with their biological or adopted children. That's the content. You have a structure, and they've attacked that. Feminism, same time period, by the way, Scott. Feminism is coming around the exact same time period. I'm okay, you're okay. Here is the order, and it's in the biblical, it's in Ephesians. It's God, Jesus Christ, man, woman, children. That's a vertical relationship. Now, the third part of the stool we're talking about is the family's place in society. And Scott, you touched on this several times. The government has become the daddy. And so we've basically just screwed all this up, and now we're having all these problems, and we're importing people from other nations like Rome did, because we don't have enough people to do the work, because we stopped having children, or because we've changed our children from boys to girls to boys. I mean, Scott, this is absolutely insane, which is going to bring me to the spiritual war. And I really want to talk to you about that, because we are in a spiritual war with physical manifestations, and we're seeing that daily. Here's a problem that I have, Scott, and maybe you and Mr. Anderson can help me out here. When we're born as humans, what kind of spiritual weapons do we have? Not gifts, but weapons do we have? Yeah, we can pray, but if there's an evil spirit, how do we control that evil spirit, Scott? Kevin, how do we control that evil spirit? Easy question. Go ahead, Scott.
Well, you said a mouthful with everything there. I want to just start with.
Sorry about that.
Well, before we talk about the evil spirit, people have to grasp how big this is. So we just went through a number of tentacles, and you start seeing, oh my gosh, there's a convergence. But
Mhm.
the convergence isn't like it just happened, just, oh wow, we gotta do this. I mean, this has been the goal for 6,000 years. It just is a convergence in our lifetime that we never thought we'd see. So what COVID did, COVID should have woken us up to repent. That's really the key element relative to COVID, and that's what it did to me. And if we don't repent, none of us know what God's timeline is, but the reality is God's character is known, and God's character requires acknowledgement of how we got here, which is from rejecting God and then repentance. And, so all these solutions for COVID, I mean, yesterday I was listening to something, we gotta have payments to all the people who suffered under COVID. I mean, my gosh, yeah, of course we need payments to them, but that's not a solution. That doesn't do anything other than turn the page. And then I do want to say when I say how big is, that 67 plan to depopulate the United States, just process this from the spiritual perspective. Those documents are there for us to find, so that this plays into Revelation 13. So I'm going to come back to that, but I just give you an example. So both of you men have heard that they want to shut down the power grid, and that's a method they're going to use to reduce the population, correct? Okay, so the chicken and egg is, which came first? The idea that we can use the power grid to manipulate people, or was the power grid set up to manipulate people? And that's how far off the rails I've gone. I believe the internet was set up to do this. The power grid was set up. It was all set up way in advance so that they can use these tools to manipulate us. They didn't figure out how to manipulate us after the fact. So that's the chicken and egg. And that's how deep this spiritual agenda is. Our tools for the spiritual agenda, I mean, look at what, if you look at the book of Job, what did, God and Satan are dueling over a person, and God's still in charge. Jesus is still sitting at the right hand of the Father. He's not up pacing around wondering, what should I do next? So the responsibility that we have is to submit to our Lord and Savior, because once we do, we should have that confidence. We have a hedge of protection around us that Job had. Satan could not touch Job. And we have that same thing. So we, as a baby, I mean, you have it by definition, because, a baby's not aware of what's going on. But, what I'm talking about is, as adults, once we realize what's happening, and we can call on God to give us that hedge of protection. I don't know if I answered your question specifically, but Mr. Anderson can add to what I just rambled about.
I'll try. It's an interesting question from being a baby. Not sure about the idea of what sin nature.
Mm-hmm.
That it's natural to sin. Our power to resist sin is reduced without the Spirit, without knowing the Lord, without having information of who He is, who our Father is. I think that's the only way to resist the devil, is to have the Holy Spirit, to be born again. It takes a while before a child would come around. I think parents have a great role in being that covering for their children, as BJ referred earlier to the hierarchy, or the belief system, the vertical belief system of Father, Son, Holy Spirit, Father, Mother, Son, Daughter, goes in that order. And we have to, in a sense, hover over our children and watch over them closely, and fill our own cups with the Spirit to protect our families. What we see in that document that we were looking at earlier is Well, there's a strong, powerful effort to destroy that, to get in between the parent and the child, so that to destroy that. And as we see the role of the parent, as BJ alluded to, in our next hour, we're going to be talking about professional parents and what that is and what that looks like. There again, it's again separating the parental authority over the children, and we see this practiced not only just in public schools where parents are willing to take their children and drop them off for 7 hours a day.
Whoa.
And then, the time the parent has with the child after school is very, very limited, because you're tied up with chores and getting dinner ready and then going to bed and starting over again the next day. And then you have the same problem even on Sunday, because a lot of parents will just drop their kids off at Sunday school while they go to a sermon, and who knows what's going on in the Sunday school.
Yep.
And so constantly the parents are abdicating their authority to others.
I think Norm wants to get in here. I'm gonna drop him in there. Norm.
Yes, sir. First, Brother Scott, thank you for all you do, and I hate that you had to go through what you did, but again, God's going to use it. It helped me to understand the devil's role and what his authority is, and his job is to tempt us, deceive us, and accuse us. That's his role, but none of those are effective if we know and apply God's word to the situation. Yep. The devil wants to use fear. Well, the Bible says God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. And so, but if we don't know God's word, we're in a real pickle, and we will, we'll fail, we'll fall. And so it's very important that we learn our identity, learn, God's character, learn the enemy's character, so we've got something to stand on. But again, we know that the enemy wants to use fear, the anxiety, depression. Depression to me is just a built-in mechanism by God to say, hey, you've got some issues that you need to deal with.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's all.
It's that's very well said, Norm. And Mr. Anderson, same thing. I mean, we have all the tools to fight this battle, but knowing the enemy, I used to own a CPA firm, and one of the men who worked for me back in the 90s, he's following Grace's story. He texted me a couple of weeks ago and said, Scott, what have you learned since you've been in this fight? And I said, well, absolutely number one is I had a cursory knowledge of Satan, but what I have learned is, it is beyond belief how much, when Jesus said Satan is the prince of this world, he was not joking around. He is the prince of this world. And, that knowing our enemy, I think is critical. And what I believe I've been called to do, it took me a long time to get here, because, God has a way. I mean, he can't give us all the truth at one time. We can't handle it. But as these doors have opened up, what I have come to grips with is Revelation 13. And reading Revelation 13, you see both systems of Satan. So he has two halves. And this is the single most important thing that he has done to convince us. We have dialectics. He uses dialectics, which means that we have two choices. And he has been masterful at that. So just take a simple dialectic, Democrat versus Republican. So we know this kind of intuitively. So Democrat evil, Republican less evil. But Satan has convinced us that less evil is good. So then he convinces us that he has a good side. Well, he can only be evil. He's evil and less evil. And, esoterically, that's Revelation 13, is we have the Antichrist system and the false prophet system. So this evil in Satan's master plan has to be exposed because by exposing the evil, it creates chaos, and then people look for the false prophet, the angel of light, and that's what's coming. So all this evil that we're uncovering, we have to be extremely careful that we are not being played by Satan. We've got to make sure people understand that history shows we are always duped by the false prophet. Look at World War I produced the League of Nations. World War II produced the United Nations. 9/11 produced the Patriot Act. The COVID produced the jab. These are all this dual nature. Satan always has both sides covered, and God is outside of Revelation 13 dualistic nature of Satan.
I want to add something here. It's B.J. Edwards' theory of spiritual warfare. I believe that when God created the heavens and the earth, he created spiritual laws and physical laws. And we operate under those spiritual laws. And like physical laws, they don't change. I want to set that as number one. Number two, if you put yourself in a position where something bad can happen, something bad can happen. And I think recognizing that we're going to make a mistake, understanding those physical laws, and by the way, that you can understand those by getting into the Bible and understanding what the Bible's saying. One of the spiritual laws would be a child needs a mother and a father. That's just a given. And when you take one of those away from them, something bad happens. And I guess with that in mind, here's the third part of that, my theory. Satan only has as much power as we give him.
Yep.
Okay. And that's where we're at fault. And after all the damage is done, wow, where do you go from there? And part of that is in my life, I've learned so much about my creator and myself by experiencing everything that I've had to experience. The bad things, especially, have really opened up a world for me, Scott. And I know you're already telling us what it's done for you.
That's right.
Not that, geez, I wish there was I wish I were smarter, Scott, but I wouldn't have to have done that. But I've got to trust our creator. And with my stubbornness, and anyway, I let my wife finish that conversation. Okay.
Yeah. Well, my stubbornness is why it takes so long. It has taken so long for God to break me. The smart. I want to just cover about. You said I wish I was smarter. Interestingly, that has been the key point of my research when I started to get into the spiritual research is Genesis 3:6. Because that's when Satan used the temptation of the pursuit of knowledge. By pursuing knowledge, we can be like God. And that's the sin that is inside all of us. Of course, God is not against knowledge. He says in Hosea 4:6, my people perish for lack of knowledge. But he's against knowledge as an idol. And Satan constantly uses that idea of knowledge as an idol. Mm-hmm. And, that is embedded. And so then he, as I told you on the phone yesterday, I'm doing a series now called The Matrix Revealed. And, the first step of that is a 3-part series. The first part I recorded, it's already on Rumble. That is the plan to take down the satanic cabal. It was written by the satanic cabal. And part 2 is going to be peeling back the layers. And then part 3 is how do we escape the matrix? The matrix can be escaped. The matrix is the world, and the world is, we've been programmed to think that we can red pill ourselves, and that's knowledge, that we can red pill ourselves and then we've got it. Well, that is not the answer. As I look at my daughter, Grace, I said this on an interview yesterday, when she was really young, 0 to 2, I cried several times thinking she's never going to be able to experience the things that I experienced. Mm-hmm. And then, as she got older, I realized I wish I had Down syndrome. And so why? Well, because, my quest for knowledge has gotten me in more trouble than anything. And, she didn't have that. She just loved. I do want to share one thing. I don't know when you're going to cut me off, but I want to just share this because
About
we
5
just
minutes, Scott.
okay. So what do you think of this? Can you see it?
Unvaccinated.
So we just this is my personal shirt, but we just started on Grace's website. You know, people always want to know how can you support us, and we're not asking for money, praise God. But if people want to support us, we do have a store now on Grace's website. It says OAG store, and we have a number of really neat, so that shirt is available, and along with a number of other ones. So that's how people can easily support us, and you get a cool shirt in return.
OurAmazingGrace.net, is that the site to go to?
Yes.
OurAmazingGrace.net. Scott Shara. Scott, I love what you're doing, brother. It would have been, look, it's easy to hide. It is so easy to hide. But I think this is part of the problem with you and I. If you're called, you can't hide.
Yeah.
You can't hide. You just, nope. That's not where you're going. That's not where you're going, Scott. That's not where you're going, BJ. Nah, you ain't going there. If you can try to go there, but it's going to hurt. And then we back out of it. I appreciate what you're doing, brother. If there's anything we can do to help you, please. You have the number. Feel free to call. I love the way you stepped out. You've got your own podcast now. You're how long was your legal battle, Scott, to even get to court?
Oh my gosh. I mean, it's painful to do this. I mean, so I've got 3 things basically going on. I've got the legal battle. We have my own podcast, and then all the interviews I'm doing, and then research. Research is still about 50% of my time. But just to get to the lawsuit, we filed the lawsuit on April 11th. To get their cost, just to get to the courthouse steps to file was about $80,000. And the reason is because we wanted to make sure that the judge didn't see this as just throwing something up against the wall and hoping for a settlement. So I paid the price to have all of Grace's records gone through and organized for trial. So we were ready for trial that day. If that would have been ideal, because I mean, we're ready. We've got the records, everything's organized, and we even had one of our experts disclosed right in our complaint that was filed on April 11th. So, the judge saw it was serious, and we're in this to win. I'm not putting any faith in a lawsuit, just so people know. I mean, I've also said publicly many times, if we win and we're awarded money damages, we're not going to take the money. It's going to get plowed back in for something else, because this is not about money. It is about, we want to win, but what does that look like? We're trying to win so that we can blaze a trail for other people. Yes, but we're trying to use the case to shed light on evil, and the whole legal system is evil to boot. So we're shedding light on the legal system, the medical system. But guess how we win? We win if the 5 doctors and 2 nurses that we sued repent. And that's when we win. So that would be fantastic, because guess what? When you repent, that means you turn away from. That means those people are going to stop killing. And I presume then they would come on TV with me and share the insides of what's going on, so that we can prevent this from happening to other people. So it's an exciting piece, but yet we can't put faith in lawsuits, folks.
Yep. Scott Shara, OurAmazingGrace.net. Scott, God bless you. Godspeed. Look, you have my permission to take the rest of the day off.
Well, thank you. Have a great day, BJ.
All right. Thank you, sir. Just Mr. Anderson, the people that we get to run into and we get to talk with as a result of what we're doing, that's amazing to me, because there are some very special people out there that have been touched in a lot of different ways. As Scott was talking about the end result here, I think of JC and all the efforts they went through with a local strip club. And for years they stood outside of it, and they went to court, and it took a while to get through the court case. And when it came down to the recompense, they won the case. You know what they wanted? They wanted the owner of the strip club to go to church. I think it was for a month.
Yeah, I think that's what it was.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing?
Well, a month with Pastor Bill. Oh my!
Be like a lifetime. Could be
Oh
like
my.
a lifetime.
Well, it would save a life, right?
Yeah, it would. I hope it. Hopefully, it has. I've never really followed up on that. Maybe one of these days I'll do that. But hey, we got a 2-minute warning coming up, or we need a little more time. I've got St. Patrick's by the numbers. I can save it for the second half, or I can do it now.
St. Patrick's is kind of an interesting topic.
Yep, by the numbers.
By the numbers.
2-minute warning.
Go.
There are 450 churches in the United States. This is St. Patrick's Day by the numbers, Sunday, named after St. Patrick, the most famous in New York City. It takes 40 pounds of dye to turn Chicago River green for St. Patty's Day. According to the U.S. Census, 650,000 babies are named Patrick in a year.
Huh.
And more than 20% of the residents of Massachusetts say they're Irish. 20.6% of those in New Hampshire claim Irish ancestry. According to Wallet Hub, the value of a leprechaun's pot of gold is 1.22 million. That wouldn't buy one tank for Ukraine. Oh, anyway, that's 1,000 gold coins weighed 1 ounce each. The crystal bowl of shamrocks is given by the President of Ireland to the President of the United States each St. Patrick's Day. There are 16 places in the United States named Dublin. We have one here in Ohio. In the U.S., 34.7 million residents claim to be of Irish descent, and 83% of those surveyed say they intend to wear green on St. Patty's Day. And there you have it, St. Patty's Day by the numbers. Speaking of numbers, do we have a 2-minute warning, Mr. Anderson? Yeah. All right, let's go for it.
Good morning and welcome to Outsiders, the show that is to woke virtue signaling and identity politics on steroids. What this particular US military spokesperson is to striking fear into the hearts of the military leaders of Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea.
All too often, I hear leaders talk about providing everyone with dignity and respect like it's an aspirational goal. That's not good enough. Dignity and respect is the bare minimum. It's the floor of where we can be. We must set our sights higher and focus on intentional inclusivity, because there are still far too many people out there, not just LGBTQ individuals, that feel marginalized, shut out, or discriminated against.
Oh, yes, you can just imagine China watching that. The West's enemies tend to be slightly more fearful of, you know, classic military tough talking and macho bravoism.
Bravissimo!
Bravissimo!
Here we go.
So for all of you out there, I ask you to set out your symbols of pride, share your pronouns in your email, particularly if you're a person who doesn't think they need to.
Ah, yes, well, share those pronouns. That'll show the Ruskies. But can someone remind me what the most common Russian and Chinese pronouns are?
Initiate difficult conversations about racial and gender barriers and share a bit of your vulnerability in a way that draws others in.
Wow.
Well, I'm really not sure that showing your vulnerabilities to draw others in is a brilliant military strategy.
Keeping you informed. This is Last Call with BJ Edwards.
How do you follow an act like that? OMG, folks. OMG. I want to get into the destruction of the facial parenting in America, but one thing that we watched for an entire week a drama with Fani Willis, the prosecutor in Atlanta that's trying to put Donald Trump in jail on trumped up charges, lawfare. Man, the amount of money this guy has to spend is just incredible. Incredible. This is an article from Joseph Mack from The Blaze. And again, I talked about the Atlanta prosecutor, Fannie Willis. I know many of you saw that. The same Fannie Willis that has been having a tryst with her local lawyer friend, who she handsomely paid to assist her in her efforts to get Trump. Well, as you might have guessed, and I said this as I was watching this, nothing's going to happen to her. Nothing is going to happen to her. And the judge in the trial lived up to my expectations. He passed up on the opportunity to do the right thing and basically punted. Judge McAfee, who, by the way, is up for re-election in November, his decision, Fannie Willis is not disqualified, but she or her lover have to walk away from the Trump Georgia case. And the lover has walked away from that. But why would he say that? If she wasn't doing anything wrong, why would he say that? Again, he chose to disqualify one of them from the case. Absolutely crazy. Judge McAfee suggested in a highly anticipated Friday ruling that as far as a possible conflict of interest is concerned, Wade's manner of payment, put it over here, not the real issue, manner of payment is not actionable on its own. A decision may also benefit Judge McAfee's upcoming re-election campaign as he's running against another Trump hater and leftist attorney and talk show host Robert Patillo, who would have used any other decision to his advantage. There is a bit of good news, however. It remains highly unlikely that the trial will take place before the November presidential election. I think we all know the background. The prosecutor was accused of being involved in a tryst with a lawyer friend who she hired after they started their relationship to help her out to put the good president, Donald Trump, in jail. This, aren't you embarrassed? I mean, really? I am. This is not who we are as Americans, folks. This is not who we are. And we need to be reminded that, not just in church, but in the public arena.
It's all a game, it seems to me.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
but it's a game we're encouraging, Mr. Anderson. We're not saying stop. We're saying, okay, I'm going to wait. I'll pray about this while we allow people to break the spiritual laws that God has set up. And again, if you encourage an event that could be bad, don't be surprised when it occurs. You've got to put the stop sign up.
Stop somewhere.
The destruction of the myth of professional parenting. I absolutely loved this because it says an awful lot. Think about where we are as parents in America today. Now, if you're fortunate enough as a grandparent, you're taking care of your child's children, which is highly recommended. But we've gotten so far away from that. For the most part, parents and children don't even live in the same state or same city. And in that case, we have to hire a, quote, professional, right? Huh? Preschools, babysitters.
Professional, okay.
Yeah, a professional. We spent a century replacing the one thing, I'm reading from the article, that can never be replaced. So let's check the scoreboard. Today's match pits progressive era feminist writer Charlotte Perkins Gilman against 21st century memorist Bob Henderson, and it's a blowout. Gilman compares rearing children, that's our feminist, to baking bread home-baked loaves, which are, by the way, inconsistent. Different wheat and grind, different rise, different oven temperatures, different baking times. So 100 loaves of home-baked bread are 100 different loaves. Some are burned on the outside, some are underbaked at the center. The things we know about children, the things we spent thousands of years of human experience learning through direct experience, are now controversial. All those different loaves. But industrial bread, industrial parenting, professional parenting, is consistent. Charlotte Perkins Gilman says. Wow. The second industrial revolution and the displacement of the home industry by corporations, Gilman argued, standardized and professionalized the production of a thing that farm wives had been screwing up for centuries. You know, the traditional family, the natural family. Every loaf from the giant commercial bakery was baked with the same ingredients, the same technique, the same ovens, the same temperature for the same amount of time, so the quality was predictable. Reading from an article from The Blaze. If all that is true, and just one home functions were professional, she wrote, why not keep professionalism more of the things we regarded as home functions? In other words, it works out in the industry. Why don't we do it in the home? Why not raise children through the standardized interventions of credentialed teachers? Morning, Mr. Anderson. Trained social workers. Good morning, Mrs. BJ. And centralized moral and intellectual curriculum developed by licensed professionals. Every loaf the same. The social vision of progressivism and the foundation of the displacement of family by the helping professionals. Can you say Brave New World? Aldous Huxley?
I think so.
Mm-hmm. Rob Henderson, counterpoint here, grew up in a foster care, living with 9 different families before his 8th birthday.
Wow.
And then with a rotating cast of adoptive parent figures, he bounced through his childhood, spending few months in one foster home and then watching the caseworker show up to take him to the next temporary family. The professional parents guide caseworkers. I know. I hear you, Mrs. BJ. I hear you. What about? Not everyone. He's written about the experience in a new book, Troubled, a memoir of foster care, family, and social class. Very young children, Henderson writes, are answering a basic set of questions about who they are and what their lives mean. All children do this. And if it's in a sterile environment, but I digress, they watch the way adults treat them, temporary, right? Professionals, right? And then they find out, sterilized environment, then they find out how much they're valued. And that sterilizes the best if they're not abused. And am I loved? Do I matter? Am I an object that gets discarded or a person who is valued? The lesson makes their lives. It also makes a part of our lives because we live in a contact with the discarded children who grew up as troubled adults. What children discover about themselves colors what they discover about the world that moves around them and shapes them the way they live in it. Valueless life, valueless world. A parent, I'm not reading off of the article, a parent is so critical to a child. A professional cannot professionalize the love, the contact between a biological parent and a child, or even a adopted child and their parent. You cannot professionalize that. It's a bonding that is critical to that child. Again, a child's image of themselves. How do they feel about themselves? Do they feel discarded? Do they feel like they're in a sterile environment, like everybody else is? 100 children being treated by the same professional?
While you're talking, I'm thinking from an adult's perspective, finding a doctor is kind of like, what you're talking about, foster parents. You find it's, remember when you used to have Marcus Welby for your doctor? I mean, some people might have that image, you had a doctor you could talk to and confide with, and he knows your name. He knows he knows your history. He knows who you are. You feel more confident with this doctor. And if you recommend something, you have a little more trust. But today, your doctor has no idea who you are. And how does that feel as a parent? Does that kind of convey how a child might feel who is passed around from foster home, or whatever?
Good point. Yeah. And modern doctor has been professionalized. Yeah, he or she is a professional.
Well, it's obvious.
But they're also corporized. Okay, they're corporate doctors. They're no longer personal doctors. They're part of the system, as are the professionals part of the social worker system, the government system. They're all part of that system. And the system, man, like Adam, I'll take it from here, Lord. I'll use man's wisdom and I'll take it from here. I know. Yeah, I see these all the, but I know how to read these, Lord. I don't need you.
That's how I felt as a teacher too, when they started to bring in the system. Remember Goals 2000?
Oh yeah.
As a teacher, this is when I began to wake up and my eyes began to open to what was happening when I was being programmed to program, and all the students now had to read at a certain level, at a certain age, at a certain time, at a certain speed.
Assembly line.
And there's that standardized testing that's supposed to be able to
standardized.
Yeah, standardized testing. Let's make everybody, the same.
Yeah.
Where's the unique qualities of human beings that God created?
You send your child or your grandchild off to a government-run indoctrination center, a education manufacturing firm, if you will. They have spatial skills. They have spatial skills. I don't know whether my volume is up high enough or not, Mr. Anderson. Can't see them. They have spatial skills, but they have to put them aside. Keep in mind, that's what made them spatial at home. But they want to fit in with this new industrialized area that they're in, this new professional area that they're in. They want to fit in. So those spatial skills sometimes get lost or even discouraged.
Yeah.
And when we're talking about,
and individual talents and skills get overlooked.
Yeah, they do. They have to be, because it doesn't fit that assembly line. You have to, as a teacher, I have to train my child to fit into this standard, because they're going to be tested by the state professionals. And this is the outcome that other statistician professionals has said we have to have. And again, a child needs to feel that they're valued. Valueless life, valueless world. I love how Jordan Peterson puts this when he says the world shifts itself around your aim. Well, what is the aim of that child that has been professionally brought up? What is their aim? If they don't feel any value, if they don't feel special. When kids are in a stable environment with reliable parents and predictable patterns, Henderson writes, they feel integrated into a social environment and find it easier to befriend peers who want the best for them. That is why foster care is a pipeline to homelessness, drug addiction, and incarceration for many children. Their childhood is teaching them instability and pain. And Henderson had extensive contact with caseworkers, counselors, school psychologists, and finally, substance abuse counselors. Henderson, who was brought up in foster care. What he always needed was a family. Parents who showed up and then stayed there. He quotes a sickening observation from a psychologist who treats abused children. I've never met a child below the age of 10 who was tortured at home who would not have chosen to stay with his or her family rather than being placed in a foster home. You understand how powerful the need for a child to be accepted by a mom and a dad. It is an incredible spiritual law. No, it's not good to be abused. I'm just telling you from personal experience, I know it is one incredible drive. And when you take that away, you take that mother, that father away, just taking one of them away, let alone foster homes. There's heck to pay. There's heck to pay because they spend the rest of their life trying to fill that incredible vacuum. I'll try to get that call. Hang on, caller. We'll try to get with you here in a second. Trying to fill that vacuum. Just incredible. And it could be drugs. It could be alcohol, drugs, sports, sex, gangs, anything strong to fill that. Caller, first name, please, and your comments.
Oh, I just wanted to let you know, good program this morning, and pretty much agree with what you're talking about. The problem is I'm a minority.
What do you mean a minority? Oh, but
the majority doesn't think like you and I.
Well, yeah. That's because
the majority.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, please.
That's because we put so much money into this system. Billions of dollars over years, trillions of dollars. And money is the power to make decisions. When you as an individual give your money to the government, you're sacrificing a portion of your ability to make decisions and giving it to the government to make those decisions for you.
Well, absolutely. And that's the problem. It's kind of hard to compete with those tax dollars that are spent to undermine what you and I might think is much better.
I hear children in the background. I love it.
Are you a grandpa?
I am a grandpa, and the kids are all in the hot tub, and I'm enjoying the sunshine.
That's great. You got your lifeguard hat on?
No, I don't have my lifeguard. But no, Jim, that it's hard when there's that much money being spent to shape the individual in a particular way. It's hard to compete against that,
Yeah.
And then you throw in the private sector joining forces. It's almost overwhelming monetarily.
Yeah, there's a momentum built up here, but part of turning that momentum around, and I always talk about public opinion. What we're trying to do is to affect that public opinion, however little or however large we can. I love that background. How little or large we can do it. We must try. You cannot sit back and complain 24/7, sit and watch Fox News and other that feed you that negative. You need to get out there and try to make a difference. Will you make a difference? I don't know, but you need to at least try. We lost him. Good. Okay, that's fine.
Norm has a comment.
Okay. All right. I'll tell you what. Okay. Norm, come on in, please.
Okay. In 1996, my wife and I became foster parents. We wanted to adopt, and I, as a counselor, I went on from being a foster parent to being trained to train foster parents, and then later to train adoptive parents. and then do some special programs for adoptive parents who there were so many adoption disruptions. People would adopt a kid and then find out they just couldn't handle them. But I was able, through that process, I was able to bring in Christian principles to teach, and they tolerated it, being taught by the state. But the thing that's so crucial is understanding how we're made. We know that God is a God of love, and God has put a need for love within each of us. And I say it's the most powerful force in the universe. And when we dissect love, we find what you were talking about, BJ. We find three key elements. We have a need to be significant or accepted.
Mm-hmm.
We have or significant or important. We have a need to be accepted, and we have a need for a sense of belonging. In other words, we have a need to fit in. And that's what drives all behavior. And see, kids begin to learn about themselves from the response they get from those around them. And you can think back when your kids, before they could even walk, and they were holding on to the coffee table, looking back at you and grinning. And they're asking questions. What do you think of me? Am I loved? Am I safe? Am I secure? And when we ignore kids, they begin to develop those feelings that they're not wanted and they're not loved. And then, of course, their self-esteem is formed here. Of course, their belief system about themselves, and that's what's going to lead kids to be loners. When they reach out time after time, and then they are rejected, they're going to begin to quit reaching out. And then the very thing that they need the most, which is love, they'll begin to fight against love when it's brought on later on. And it's a very, very difficult issue. But anyway, that need for love is so powerful. Again, it drives all behavior. And unfortunately, even adults, that's why adults are, look at me, look at my big car, look at my big house, look at my education. That never stops until we develop that relationship with the Lord Jesus Christ, that we are significant, we are accepted, we do have a sense of belonging with Him. But anyway, I was able over the years to spend a lot of time training foster and adoptive parents and bringing in that the biblical side of it, which I think helped.
I think Betty has a comment as well. I'm going to bring Betty on. Go ahead, Betty.
Hey, Norm, I want you as my dad. Because I was in a foster home, and you know what? Too many foster kids like me found love in the wrong ways, because we were looking for love. We couldn't understand love. And I was thinking, I never did hear in 10 years my foster parents tell me they loved me. They loved the money, but they did not love me. Whoa. So I am so thankful that my mom instilled Jesus in me. And eventually, and I was born again when I was 13, but I fell on my face many a time because I was not taught the right things. So God bless you, Norm, for doing what you did.
Any comments, Father Norm?
Well, again, it's this need that God has put in us. Yeah, I'll be glad to be grandpa to you or father or somebody. Anyway, just call me. BJ can give you my number. But we just miss such an opportunity with our kids because people get so busy, dealing with other things. And, it's just sad what kids have to go through. And again, they're constantly reaching out, trying to learn about themselves. And, when we reject them over and over and over, just with our busyness, son, not now, maybe later, mom, look at me. Well, hun, not now. I'm fixing supper, and if you're going to have kids, they need to be a priority.
Amen. I'm going to finish the article. Thanks for the comments, folks. Young children who are brutally harmed by their parents nonetheless yearn for their mom and dad. It is a natural need, folks. They immediately want a home, a family, a set of stable attachments. Amen to that. Dragged from abuse, they ache for the home, even if you take it out of it. Two wrongs don't make a right here, folks. If you're a parent, it hurts to read this. We spent decades making families unimportant and deliberately designed public policy. We've torn down parenting as an honorable task and savaged the parent-child connection. California legislators mock the talking points of parental rights and explain that family is often very harmful. In their industrialized minds, they think children become mentally healthy and stable by receiving mental health services from trained professionals, funded and provided by the government, of course. The working assumption of the political class is that parents cannot meaningfully talk to their children because they aren't even licensed to do that. Oh, I hope they're not listening in Washington, D.C. Because the next thing you know, Mr. Anderson, we're going to see a bill up there where parents have to be licensed every 4 years, maybe.
I think in a way we already are.
That's true.
We're already required. You got to get a marriage license, but that's another rabbit trail.
Yeah. Well, CPS comes up, you can say, whoop, 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 whoop. Sorry, we have a license. You can't stop this car, right? You can't stop this family. We have our license.
There you go.
All right.
Yeah.
That'll be the pretense for doing this.
We have these people, professionals, they call them, intervening in ways that some think they're doing a good job, and maybe some are. I mean, there are a lot of families in trouble out there, more than I want to think about. Not to, well, anyway, my own included. But so looking for answers, it's tough out there. But looking for this, where the problem starts, it starts with
us.
It starts with us and our lack with our relationship with our Father in heaven.
Yep.
And while we begin to find that, find that late in life, then you look back and go, "Oh my goodness, what I could have done differently for my own family."
The things we know about children, the things we spent thousands of years of human experience learning through direct experience, are now controversial, if not entirely discarded. We cannot think Brave New World, folks. 1984. We cannot replace family with the helping of professionals. We will never succeed at this. We're sowing destruction in the lives of children by discarding their most necessary connections. Don't worry, though, because we can just assign them all to a caseworker. Mrs. BJ and I are probably going to have a discussion after this. Nothing else we'll ever do will be more shameful than this. We had a choice. We're now tolerating willful destruction. Remember me mentioning spiritual laws? And it's kind of like a template, and a mother and a father. Think about, and I think we have a video going to take us back to the 1940s, late 1940s. But think about what happened to the family in America after World War II, and how it became more professionalized, if you will. We had to have not one parent out of the home, but both parents out of the home to work to keep up with the Joneses, so we could have something.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then no fault divorce. If we had a law on the books that favored natural families, and anything that you do, whether you pass a law or any kind of an action that goes against that, there's going to be a consequence in society. If you pass a law that says
that you can't have that law,
no fault divorce, we get rid of that law. And say, before you get married, you need to understand that this is a permanent bonding, blood brothers and sisters. You're going to become one. You need to understand that, and you need to commit to that. And let's say, for example, just off the top of my head, keep in mind it's BJ. For example, that, okay, if you get a divorce, your wife or your spouse, I'll just say you can no longer claim yourself on your income tax. You have no deductions for yourself. or there's a penalty assigned to that. Or if you do get a divorce, you're required to be with your children, and there's going to be a fine and imprisonment if you don't. Well, maybe imprisonment isn't a good thing to do because you're going to be away from the children, but some kind of a punishment for not giving those children. Remember what we just went through. A children needs that parent. In so many cases, when you have divorce, you have one parent becomes the good guy or gal, and one parent becomes the bad guy or gal. And it seems that whoever is living with the parent most of the time becomes the good parent, and the one that doesn't live with them becomes the bad parent. Keep in mind, a child knows who his mother and father are. Keep that in mind. So when you badmouth that other parent, you're badmouthing your child at the same time.
Stop it.
Yep.
Just stop it.
Yep. And if a judge comes, you come into court and you've had the divorce, and the one spouse that has the child, the judge says, well, we're going to go to break here shortly. We have written evidence here that you've been saying bad things about this child's father or this child's mother. Well, yeah, Your Honor, he's a complete blah, 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 blah. Okay, that's fine. But that's between you and you. That's not between you and the child. Can you imagine if we had that kind of mentality, where we'd be right now? If we didn't have divorce, if when you got married, you were a virgin. A society that insists on that. Actually, that's a society where we used to be a long time ago.
There was a time.
There was a time.
There was a time.
When we come back, I want you to play that video, but let's take a break. BJ Edwards along with Mr. Anderson, your last call. Natural.
Faith, discussion, and so much more. Last Call with BJ Edwards.
And we're back. And we have something special for you here. Keep it in line with our conversation today.
I think the election was a victory for good government. It might also be called a victory for propaganda. But that would have been equally true if our opponent had won.
But how can you study it?
Well, you can begin by investigating the techniques of propaganda. Here, I've listed some of the main ones. Glittering generalities?
What is a glittering generality?
That headline you were quoting, a victory for good government. Good government is a phrase we use many times during the campaign. We said the mayor stood for good government and promised good government.
But it's true, isn't it?
What's true? What does good government mean? Is the mayor's idea of good government the same as yours?
I see. It's a glittering generality.
One of the best.
There's another.
Yes. And why do you suppose our opponents chose that phrase?
I guess because everybody likes a real American.
Right. And they wanted to transfer that liking for a real American to Mr. Butler. A day or so after that poster came out, I said in one of my campaign speeches, our opponent advertises himself as a real American. I say he is unreal, unrealistic. He is a visionary, a theorist, a dreamer. He is so thirsty for public office that like a weary traveler in the desert, he sees a mirage, and he is trying to sell it to you as real. There. Now what would you call that?
That's name-calling, visionary, theorist, dreamer.
That's right. And those are very polite names. For my collection of propaganda materials, I've made a special record of part of one of Mr. Butler's radio speeches.
Mayor Cooper asks that he be judged by his performance in office. Very well. Let's ask him who was mayor when the municipal waterworks fell into such a state of disrepair that the whole town was without water for 2 days. Let's ask him. But no, let's not. It might embarrass him.
That's what we call card stacking. Cooper was mayor when the pumping station broke down, but it was the men in office before him who allowed it to get into such a rundown condition, and it finally gave way before he could get anything done.
And card stacking is choosing some facts and leaving out others, and arranging them to suit your purpose.
Now, did you see our little campaign movie?
Yes, a couple of times.
Well, let's look at it again.
Land sakes. A body hardly has time enough. The house to clean, and the washing to do, and the men folks to feed. They like their chocolate cakes, too. But I do want to take time to tell you that I've known Dick Cooper ever since he was knee-high to a grasshopper. He comes of a good, respectable family, just as honest as the day is long. And he knows our town. He's one of us. That's why I'm going to vote for Mayor Cooper. And all my friends are going to vote for him, too.
Recognize the technique?
That must be what you call plain folks.
That's right. You'll find many versions of the appeal based on the common man, the man on the street, log cabin to president. Now let's look at the rest of the movie.
Yes, Mrs. Hamline is voting for Mayor Cooper. Her friends are voting for Mayor Cooper. Your friends are voting for Mayor Cooper. The people know what they want, and what they want is Mayor Cooper. Don't you be left behind. Get on board the Victory Special. Vote for Mayor Cooper and ride with him to victory.
That ending's easy to spot. It's the bandwagon.
Yes, the propaganda we've been talking about is easy to detect. But a great deal of propaganda is much more hidden, much harder to detect.
That's what's bothering me. Even in a small local election, there's so much propaganda. That poster, a real American, it uses a transferred device. Does that mean it isn't true?
Not necessarily. Evaluating propaganda isn't that simple. Recognizing the technique is one step. Another step is to know the purpose. What is the purpose here?
That's easy. To get people to vote for Butler.
Yes, to persuade people that Butler is the better man, to move them to vote for him. In short, to sell Mr. Butler to the voters. You'll find that the purpose of most propaganda is to persuade people to believe something.
I talked earlier about spiritual gifts, spiritual war. If we follow the spiritual truth, that's the weapon we can use in cases like this. And folks, we really need it. What you see is a raw beginning. Now it's a lot more professional. But the spiritual laws that you know, the truths that you know, will get you through that type of propaganda. You have a sense about things. You know what I mean? You just sense, something's off here. Something's not right. I think I'm going to let Betty, and she had a question or comment. I think I got her. There you go, Betty. Go ahead, please, Betty.
No, I didn't have no comment. All I can say is that there is some good foster homes out there, but majority of them there, if they can't tell you I love you, and a lot of them are just there for the money. I'm not kidding. I tell you what, they make some big bucks off the children because they made a lot of money off of us. And back then, I know they were getting $76 a month for me. And for 10 years, and it probably increased every year, but there was 9 kids. So if you think about that, let's say $80 times 9 is $720 a month back in the 60s and 70s. They made buku bucks.
And that's on the subject of foster care. Look, it's an issue that we've created by not demanding, and we know the difference between right and wrong, by not demanding righteousness, by just letting this slide and letting that slide. And I can, it's difficult for me not to always regress, if you will, to the natural family. But that really is foundational in terms of getting out of this mess we're in today. I started to mention about laws and that you insist, maybe insist is the wrong word, but we need to prize the family, prize the relationship between the husband and the wife, between the father and the child, and the mother and the child. We need to bring that back to a more personal relationship, if you will. Intimate relationship. Unfortunately, a lot of our children now are having intimate relationships prior to ever getting married. And sometimes those intimate relationships get a little sideways. I think about our friend David Arthur in his childhood and what happened to him. Good, Mr. Anderson.
I think, getting back to the basics, and I'm just going to show this meme and see what it inspires and thought. I saw it yesterday on Facebook. The local church is the only place on earth where little children, the elderly, families, singles, widows, and adopted orphans, all of different races, colors, and socioeconomic backgrounds, come together to sing of victory and partake of one supper and confess one faith. Now, I know that's probably idealistic for the way we think of church, but a way of bringing the family and generations together is something that we need to, I think about and try to bring everybody into this circle.
Yeah, obviously, but it's pie in the sky, Mr. Anderson. It's not possible. And because of that, we have to have professionals that put us in the right direction. Yep. Got another caller coming in.
You get it.
I can't. Let's try it again, caller. Go ahead.
Megan.
Go ahead.
I can.
Can you hear me?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Not.
Yes, we can.
Always.
Sorry, it's hard for me to hear you over BJ. Yeah, I have a comment. Oh, do I get to go on air?
You're on the air.
Oh, okay, because I'm listening to the show right now and I'm not on the air.
Well, that's where we're getting feedback.
Yeah, there's a delay.
Okay.
There's a delay.
I'm sorry. Well, this is Kathleen. And regarding the subject of mental health, which you were addressing before the break, I just want to start off by saying children need to be brought up in the way that they should go. And in the end, they will not depart from it. And so when we send them in, we all know this, that when we send them into the public government school system, it's a God system. But regarding the mental health aspect that has entered into it, which is a very deliberate ploy, it's about a number of things, one of which is getting the children on drugs, which will alter their perception and their, I believe, probably their ability to recognize the truth about God. It's about framing them as being mentally ill for purposes like later on in life they wouldn't be able to own guns and things like that, getting them on drugs so that they can be programmed. And then regarding what's happening with our schools, Charlotte Iserbyt, who wrote The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America, who died, I think, a couple of years ago. She was an amazing whistleblower. She was a senior policy advisor in the Office of Educational Research under Ronald Reagan. She was a whistleblower, and she said that what's going on with the schools is that the plan is to have them be the community hub, where everything happens at the school, meaning you take your preschool and your young children for daycare there, but there's also lifelong education. It's called cradle to grave education, basically to keep people programmed and under control and drugged, et cetera, et cetera. So I'll just end by saying the same thing. At this point, I see the only option besides fighting this and standing up against it is homeschooling, period, end of story. Children need to be brought up in the way they should go, with Christian homeschooling. And thank you for listening.
Kathleen, don't be a stranger. Thank you very much. Great input. Great input. Thank you very much.
Thank you. God bless you.
Wow. Wow. And she is correct. But how do you get from point A to point B? We're so wrapped up financially into government-run schools. But I have an answer for that. It is a true backpack bill. No restrictions, a true trust the parents. Yes, there's going to be some abuse, but not nearly as much as we're experiencing in government-run schools. Do I need to remind you of the counseling that kids get where they end up changing some physical attributes that they were born with regards to their sexual orientation? Insane. When teachers fight to keep drag queens in school and the Bible out of school, you need new teachers. Yeah, you do, but not in government-run schools. If let me tell you something. If we make, and this is why the backpack bill types are so good, if we make government-run indoctrination schools, public schools, if we make them competitive, the game changes drastically. Yeah, capitalism. That's right. If the money follows your child, then when you sit down and talk with a teacher, there's motivation there, folks, is there not? Oh, you bet your sweet Bippy there is. Great, Kathleen, just great points. I love our listeners. I really love our listeners. Hey, when we come back, I want to talk to you about Christian nationalism. We kind of explained it in one of our programs, but I ran across something the other day that really, I think is exceptional in terms of explaining what Christian nationalism is. And by the way, that's exceptional as well. Going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to play that. This is well, hang on a second. Nope, Norm muted himself. Norm, did you want to say something before we go to break? Hang on. I got you.
You know, I was on a call yesterday and they were talking about trying to get Bible back in schools. And here's my concern. Who's going to teach it?
Yes.
You know, I think that evil folks would love to teach the Bible in school. and I mean, you know very well, I mean, you can go through the Old Testament and you can make God out to be, you know, this horrific, you know, mean, just waiting to kill you, you know. So no, I'm really not for putting it back in schools. You know, I would be for, you know, if we had people to teach it correctly, I would be, but no, I think the left would love to teach the Bible in schools.
Well, Norm, here's the good news. That's never going to happen because Christians couldn't decide which version to use.
That's true.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate your input. I got you. Let's take a break, Mr. Anderson. And when I come back, I want to get this Christian nationalism. I think this is an incredible talk about this. B.J. Edwards along with Mr. Anderson. This is your last call.
Last call with B.J. Edwards. Real talk about real life.
And we're back, at least most of us. Some of you have been blasted up against the wall on that last one, so I have to apologize for that. So what is Christian nationalism? Really, what is that? What's this all about?
Well, it's many things to many different people, and some people fear it, some people embrace it, and I think we all misunderstand it, but I agree. I think this article that you ran across helps out. It gives us an idea of what to think about it.
Anyway. By Crisis Editor. It's an election year in America, which means that the political left is trotting out its favorite fear-mongering apparatuses again. For the past few years, politicians and pundits alike have leaned heavily on terms like far-right, bigoted, racist, transphobic, and extremist, But topping the list of late has been Christian nationalist. But what is a Christian nationalist? Just last week, Politico propagandist and self-described reporter Heidi Perzibillah appeared on MSNBC to offer her definition of a Christian nationalist. They believe that our rights as Americans and as all human beings do not come from any earthly authority. They don't come from Congress, from the Supreme Court, they come from God. Her comments followed a Politico article she authored in which she wrote, Christian nationalists in America believe that the country was founded as a Christian nation and that Christian values should be prioritized throughout government and public life. Of Perzibillah's two assessments, the latter is nearer the truth than the former. If the defining characteristic of a Christian nationalist were a belief that our rights as Americans and as all human beings do not come from any earthly authority but from God, then the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution would be tantamount to Christian nationalist manifestos. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty and the pursuit of happiness, Thomas Jefferson wrote in 1776. Of course, even though Perzibillah and her comrades don't outright declare such men as Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, and the legendary George Washington Christian nationalists, their political counterparts worked tirelessly to suppress the admiration of such men and the principles they championed, right down to removing monuments to the founders of America across the country. Why? Perzibillah answers that, and rather candidly, because the country has become less religious and more diverse. Indeed, the nation has become more diverse than it was at its inception. It is difficult to imagine the founding fathers discussing Sharia law and satanic idols when drafting the First Amendment. But it has not become less religious. In fact, the growing Muslim rebellion against such projects as gender ideology and sex education, and the popularity and platform of the pagan former Republican presidential primary candidate Vivek Ramaswamy, are evidence that non-Christians also embrace, at least for the most part, the American vision articulated by the founders almost 2.5 centuries ago. No, the country is not less religious than it once was, only less Christian. Certainly, a majority, about 63%, according to the Pew Research Center, of Americans identify as Christian, but that share has been declining for decades, already down from nearly 90% in the early 1990s. Even among those who identify as Christian today, Christian principles and morality are not always advocated and are sometimes even undermined, either in the name of some modernist, Marxist, all-mercy no-justice revisioning of Christ or for the sake of some misconstrued, misunderstood notion of a separation of church and state. A clear example of this would be the incumbent president, Joe Biden, who identifies as a Catholic and even erroneously touts his faith, all while vociferously endorsing, promoting, and funding such evils as abortion, homosexuality, transgenderism, and socialism. While Christianity has suffered a drastic decrease in recent years, a new religion has risen to take its place, leftism. Yes, leftism is a religion. Much like Catholicism, it even boasts a clergy, sacraments, and dogmas. Its clergy are elite power brokers, media personalities are its preachers while politicians serve as priests, legislating sacrifice to their gods. Its sacraments are multitudinous, from transgendering children and stocking school libraries with pornographic picture books all the way to its highest, or, rather, lowest, form of unholy prayer, abortion. Peter Kreeft once wrote, "Abortion is the Antichrist's demonic parody of the Eucharist." That's why it uses the same holy words, "This is my body," with the blasphemous opposite meaning. Leftism also has its own dogmas and doctrines, rigorously enforced by its own Office of the Inquisition. Those who dare question transgenderism, diversity and equity, drag queen story hours, or the sudden appearance of 10 million illegal immigrants are swiftly dealt with and forced to recant their heresies or be excommunicated and labeled extremists and bigots. Which brings us back to those intolerant, extremist, Christian nationalists. Every lie, they say, contains at least a seed of truth, but Perzibillah, perhaps unwittingly, offered a whole seed cake's worth. Christian nationalists in America believe that the country was founded as a Christian nation and that Christian values should be prioritized throughout government and public life. This assessment is very close to being spot on. Despite all the hyperinflated fearmongering, those derided by the White House and its media mouthpieces as Christian nationalists are not trying to force all Americans to attend Mass weekly. We are not endeavoring to install altar rails in the Capitol building, nor are we attempting to replace the Star-Spangled Banner stars with rosary beads. So, what are we doing? John Adams, a framer of the Constitution and George Washington's successor as president, wrote in 1798, "Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other." Christian nationalists are simply trying to be a moral and religious people and ensure the success of the American experiment in so doing. Certainly, we want to legislate Christian morality, to end the slaughter of unborn children, to ban the scourge of pornography, to keep little boys and little girls from having their sex organs hacked off or hacked open. These are measures which the Founding Fathers might have called the basics had they ever lived to see the horrors of the modern age. In his prescient book The Abolition of Man, C.S. Lewis called the set of principles compelling such common-sense measures the Tao, which is simply objective truth, natural law, the pursuit of inerrant virtue. One could easily argue that Christian nationalists are simply upholding the Tao, whether at the dinner table or in the voting booth. Lewis prophesies what will come about if the Tao, the tenets of today's Christian nationalism, are forgotten, the emergence of an elite class of conditioners. He predicts, the ultimate springs of human action are no longer, for them, something given. They have surrendered, like electricity, it is the function of the conditioners to control, not obey them. They are the motivators, the creators of motive. He then asks, but how are they going to be motivated themselves? When I said just now that all motives fail them, I should have said all motives except one. All motives that claim any validity other than that of their felt emotional weight at a given moment have failed them. Everything except the sic volo, sic jubeo has been explained away. But what never claimed objectivity cannot be destroyed by subjectivism. When all that says it is good has been debunked, what says I want remains. It cannot be exploded or seen through because it never had any pretensions. The conditioners, therefore, must come to be motivated simply by their own pleasure. This is the end result of leftism, the God that it worships, complete, unbridled abandon to self. This is also why Christian nationalism poses such a threat, indeed, an existential threat, to leftism, because Christianity is dedicated to complete, unbridled abandon of self to Christ. Where leftism declares that every man can be a god, Christianity teaches that every man ought to be a slave to Christ. The catch, of course, is that by being slaves to Christ, we also become sons of God, Galatians 4:7. Leftism cannot abide the threat of Christian morality, nor even of the profession that all men are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, because this would admit the existence of a Creator, a God, who not only demands but deserves worship. The fever dream of every man being God would be broken. In the end, that is what it means to be a Christian nationalist, to boldly declare that God is law and that the laws penned by man must be in accord with law himself. Leftism declares the perverse inverse, that man is God, and thus any law penned by man is, by its nature, in accord with the law of the gods. With liberalism and relativism as the chief ideologies of the day, the only remaining threat to the leftist state of self-worship is Christian nationalism. Image credit, Shutterstock.
Okay, hey, listen, I want you to have a great weekend. I got one quote for you. The government is like a baby's alimentary canal, with a happy appetite at one end and no responsibility at the other. Hope you've enjoyed the program today. Thanks everybody for participating. Have a great weekend. Have a safe St. Patrick's Day. We're out of here.
We're green.
Join us next week for Last Call with BJ Edwards.